why did he get killed? He's pro Seventh-day Sabbath. He's writing a book about it. Like he's had a lot of discussions about it in the past. Part of me just kind of wonders, like, well, why did he get killed? Was there any link to any of his religious beliefs that ultimately led him there, or was it just because of his statements on gun violence, or what? Why is that?
You know, it feels kind of funny discussing this tragic thing that has happened over these last day.
Yeah.
And especially because it's like dealing with a podcaster.
Yeah.
And somebody that I've actually watched tons of his videos. How about you?
Yeah, I've seen a good bit of his videos. I've followed him for a while, actually. So
yeah, I mean, he really had a passion to get out there and talk about tough subjects. And, you know, it's something like this to happen in broad daylight in the public is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think it's completely reprehensible. And I think the fact that the saddest thing about it is that his kids, which he has 2 kids from what I understand, and they're both very young.
Were they there?
From what I understand, they were,
man.
but I haven't confirmed that. But that's somebody told me that they were there, as was his wife. And I mean, that's so tragic.
It is.
You know?
And you know, like it just doesn't even matter, like, which side did this. It's just kind of tragic, and I hope people see that we should not be treating each other like this at all. But
right.
You know, we are more polarized than ever before.
Yep.
And, you know, ironically, even what he was discussing at the time that the bullet struck him was, I mean, eerie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the fact that, you know, he's leaving behind 2 kids and a wife, it's so sad that in today's political climate, you can have somebody who's killed simply for words.
Right.
And, you know, one of the things that I appreciate about his whole thing is that he was open to having discussions with people.
Right.
And so he would have people up, and he was actually really good at discussing with them, and he was often quite polite to them. Not 100% of the time, but a lot of the times he was like, oh, it's a great question, you know, and he would have open dialogue. And I think that's one thing that we should value. And that's apart from, you know, picking a political side. That's kind of separating yourself out from left versus right and just saying, as a whole, as a country, we should be having more conversations. And I don't think that conversations should lead to political violence like this. I mean, this was, in my opinion, and others have said it as well, this is a political assassination.
Yeah, it really is. And to speak to the point that you just mentioned about him, like, being kind in the way that he responded, mm-hmm. He did have a knack to see through the emotional attachment to the way that
yes.
either those questions were being framed, and he would kind of quickly throw that out on the table and be mm-hmm. like, you know, if this is what you're wanting to say, to like throw emotion into it, you know, then we can discuss that. But if you really want to have your question answered, let's deal with this, you know.
Right.
I thought that was a very gentle way to keep the conversation on track, not let it get muddy in the water. And yeah, what a sad situation that somebody felt like this was a better option.
Right. Well, you know, I was working yesterday, and the news popped up on my phone. You know, somebody texted me about it, and I, along with, I'm sure, millions of other people, was immediately glued to the news as like, wow, like, how could this happen? Especially in today's age where everybody has a cell phone, everybody has a video camera. And so there's multiple videos of the whole event going down, which, you know, you see this horrible graphic event. I mean, there's close-up video footage of it that I don't encourage anybody to go watch it, but there's close-up video footage of it happening. And so what a unique age we live in, where you can watch this kind of thing unfold real time and see it go down. And because I'm a medical professional, I can actually say that it's most likely that he did not suffer very much. It was very clean as far as that goes.
Yeah. You know, with that many people around and hitting a target like that in such a way, it almost seems like it had to be someone that knew what they were doing. I mean, that just would be a really random good shot. That's probably 1 in 100 to be that far away.
Well, you know, the thing is he was over 100 yards away for sure.
Yeah.
And there was no like initial shots. There wasn't like, oh, I missed the first couple and I kind of got my way to the right spot. He hit a very small target instantly, one shot, that's it. So whoever did it, had to have some experience. This wasn't somebody that went out yesterday and bought a gun for the first time and decided, oh, let's go see what I can do with it. Somebody had been planning this. And so, this whole discussion is actually in a background of violence here in the rest of society. There was actually a Ukrainian woman who came to North Carolina, and she was killed here recently. And then there was also some other violence taking place where there's been other people that have been shot and killed. And so it reminds me of that Bible verse that says that in Matthew 24, where, in the last days, the love of many shall grow cold.
Yeah, you've physically seen that.
And, to your point, though, it doesn't really matter which side does this, or who does this. I actually saw there was an article on a website called Jezebel where, and this was it was published September 8th, but they paid this editor, whoever did this on Jezebel, they paid a couple of Etsy witches to have a curse on Charlie Kirk.
Wow.
And so if you go back, I think they actually paid the Etsy witches August 24, and the Etsy witches said, oh, it'll take a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks for this to take effect. And if you scroll down in the article, one of the witches was burning a photo of Charlie Kirk. It was one of the things that they did. And so part of me wonders, how does that fit? How does the spiritualism aspect of it fit when you have somebody trying to curse somebody else in today's society?
It's not very often that I get shocked hearing a piece of information like that. But are you kidding me? On Etsy?
Yeah.
I don't know if I mean, that's disturbing.
Yes.
That we have something that you would go to somebody and want to do some harm to them.
Right.
Just because you don't know them, give me $5 and I'll put a curse on that person.
Right.
What in the world is that?
Right. And some people view it lightheartedly and are like, oh, well, nothing's actually going to happen. It's just for fun. But I wonder if the spiritual forces behind the scene, you're kind of giving them permission a little bit.
Yeah.
And there's stories like that people give permission for others to get hurt or injured. Yeah. I don't know. There's some interest to it.
I remember seeing some videos of witches that were trying to put a hex on Trump when he became president, and there was kind of a lot of that activity. And I don't know if you've ever seen in them talk about Wiccan and those religions, but actually during COVID, those really took off like wildfire. A lot of people felt powerless from home, and all of a sudden it was there was nothing to do but sit there and play around on the internet, and you saw this boom of spiritualism.
Yep.
And it's ironic to me that you see these cycles that come through us historically speaking. So in the late 1800s, there was a boom of spiritualism. That's when you had the sisters rapping in New York, and everybody was now starting to discuss these things are real behind the scenes.
Yeah, the Fox sisters, I think it was.
The Fox sisters, yes. And everybody kind of gets on board, and you saw a religious awakening simultaneously with a spiritualism awakening. And I think that we are kind of seeing something like that today. I mean, each generation, it seems like they kind of cross over this ground, but boy, we've seen spiritualism just take off in the movies and television and video games, and now it's just it seems like everybody's into the whole Halloween scene, right?
Yeah.
And you see voices that are starting to step up and try to reorientate us back to God.
Right.
And so, I think that these things are also a taste prophetically of what we were told the times was going to be like.
You're right. And I think that what we're seeing happen in society is a pendulum that is swinging. And you actually saw this pendulum swing farther and farther to the left with a lot of ideals that are actually born out of atheism. And Trump's whole campaign, which actually Charlie Kirk had a large hand in. In fact, there's some political pundits who are saying that Trump would not have won except for Charlie Kirk's help, because his organization Turning Point was actually heavily involved with Trump's campaign. But there's this campaign that's actually pushing more of a return towards God, a return towards Christian standard, Christian morality. And so Trump has said that, he has said multiple times that, we need God, and that he wants to bring people back to church. He doesn't like the falling of church numbers, etc. And so you have this response basically to seeing this leftist atheistic agenda that is pushing all of society and culture back towards the right, if that makes sense. And so Charlie Kirk was a part of this. One of the things, though, that I really appreciated about Charlie Kirk is that he was actually a Seventh-day Sabbath keeper.
Wow, that's awesome.
So he has a video where he was talking to some students, and he says that if you keep Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, the seventh-day Sabbath, in accord with the Bible, he says your life will be infinitely blessed.
Wow, praise God.
Friday night to Saturday night, the world cannot reach me, and I get nothing from the world. It will bless you infinitely. Now, I'm not saying you're bound by the law as a Christian. I'm not saying that that's something you have to do. I'm saying it will make your life better. It was important enough that God put it as one of the 10 Commandments. And I will say, there's debate in some theological circles that we are bound to it because it predated the law. God rested after creation. So I want you to think about that. So Friday night to Saturday night, no one can reach me. And I wake up, I wake up on Saturday night, I open up my phone, 600 text messages, 900, whatever. But it is the best 24 to 25 hours. And if every young person took a legitimate Sabbath from Friday night to Saturday night, I guarantee you, anxiety would go down, depression would go down, you'd actually spend time with people you care about, meaningful conversations would happen. So I challenge you, if you incorporate that in your life, there's no negative.
And he actually was getting ready to release a book that was going to be released in December, specifically about keeping the Sabbath.
Wow.
Which I thought was really cool.
That is really cool. I hope they still release that.
I hope they do. And I hope that he was actually finished with it to where it would get released. So, I think that he was searching for the truth and he was wanting to bring people to God, which I think is admirable. Part of the movement that he was kind of associated with, though, is actually Christian nationalism, where basically, again, it's pushing society back towards the right, towards seeking God, basically.
So he thought that we need Christianity back in the government, and the separation between church and state should not necessarily be there.
Christian nationalism, yeah, it's basically a push towards how we need to return towards morality, basically. We need to return to God, and they believe that they should legislate the 10 Commandments, all 10 of them. So not just the last 6, which deal with our duty to our fellow man, but even the first 4.
Which is really interesting because if Charlie Kirk really believed in the Sabbath, I mean, there is a lot of people, 90% of the Christian community doesn't adhere to a Friday night to Saturday night.
Correct.
And so that would be a very interesting rub if they're legislating to do something that there's Christians that don't believe that.
And so that actually raises questions in my mind about, okay, he's pro Seventh-day Sabbath. He's writing a book about it. Like he's had a lot of discussions about it in the past. And so why did he get killed? Part of me just kind of wonders, why did he get killed? Was there any link to any of his religious beliefs that ultimately led him there? Or was it just because of his statements on gun violence or what? Why is that? I don't know if we'll ever really know the answer to that. And I'm not trying to push forward any particular view there.
And I'm sure both sides are going to try to write that view.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, I think that there's something called a Hegelian dialectic, where basically you take two halves of society, and through the grinding of those two halves, you have a synthesis, which is what your ultimate desire is.
Right.
So part of me wonders, his death actually does not help the more atheistic side. It actually helps. A lot of people are going to view that and say, we need to go more back to God.
Yes.
I was looking on Twitter or on X after this event happened, and there was a lot of people on there that were saying, we need God.
Yeah.
We need to pray.
Well, and that's something that I think, being a Christian ourselves, I would rally behind. Yes, we need God. I hope everybody has the desire to want to return to godliness.
Right.
But when you start getting into the ideas of we need to legislate this and now cause you to do these things, But let's just say your heart's not in it, but I don't want to go to jail, so I'm just going to do it.
Right.
Well, what's that going to do to the church with a bunch of people that are like not really wanting to be there, but they have to because the government tells them they had?
It's hypocrisy.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
And I think that's why we saw. I think we're seeing the far pendulum swing, like you said, and starting to come back. I think it's very purposeful that it got pushed over there, that we're questioning whether we're even human. I mean, there was really wild ideas that people were trying to say, society needs to adhere to this. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you cause it crazy like that, and it's just crazy, if you're a, half-sane Christian, you're going to be like, we don't want that. Give us whatever. We're just not going to take that.
Exactly.
And that's when the whole thing starts swinging back the other way. And I believe that the devil's final masquerade is going to be of a religious order.
Yes.
And he's going to say, oh, you want religion back? I got the perfect religion for you.
So one of the things I think is important is if you study the Bible, specifically the books of Daniel and Revelation, you can see there that symbolically, the United States is actually mentioned in Bible prophecy, which you guys have a whole video out about
Lamb like
that, actually.
beast, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep, which kind of discusses that whole notion. And I think that what we're going to face at the end times is actually a line in the sand discussion, mm-hmm. where you either follow God and what he says to the letter, mm-hmm. or you follow the traditions of man to the letter in place of that truth.
And I want to unpack that just a second, because if you go all the way back to the beginning, Adam
mm-hmm.
and Eve, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got into this mess because we didn't listen to God.
Yes.
And so it's like full circle. It's coming back around. And instead of an individual, Adam and Eve dealing with this, it's like humanity dealing with this.
Right.
And we're almost crossing back over the same thing, because every single Christian is going to agree with you on 9 of those commandments.
Right.
Every single one.
Yes.
I mean, I haven't met a Christian that's like, nope, it's totally cool to cheat on your wife or kill people. That's totally cool.
Right.
I have not met one yet.
No.
But when you get to the 4th commandment, remember the Sabbath day, right? Oh, well, we don't really need to keep that. And that was already fulfilled in Jesus. And that becomes this interesting, morality issue that's almost like this isn't a moral issue.
And what's so interesting in relation to Charlie Kirk is that he was one of the lone voices that is kind of affiliated with the Christian nationalist movement who was saying we need to keep the 7th-day Sabbath, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. Most of the other voices out there, I would say all the other voices out there that I have seen, are saying we need to legislate Sunday. And in fact, Project 2025, which if you look at, there's like an online tracker of how much of Project 2025 has been legislated, and most of it is being legislated or is in works basically to that. And you guys actually have a whole video about Project 2025 that's really interesting. Mm-hmm. But one of the snippets in there is that Congress shall amend the Fair Labor Standards Act to specifically pay people time and a half worked on Sunday, and it would default to Sunday. Mm-hmm. And so there's a proposal anyway to have this push towards we need Sunday rest. We were actually up at the inauguration of Trump, not necessarily there to try and support one side or the other, but we were actually up there specifically to talk about this whole where the country is heading, basically. Mm-hmm. And we were handing out a book up there. It's actually a history book called The Great Controversy.
Mm-hmm. Love the book.
And it actually talks about the history of the Protestant Reformation, basically for the last 2,000 years since Christ. And it's a really fantastic read. And if you guys can put a link in the channel description.
Definitely will.
To link it if anybody wants to get a copy of it. But we were handing out copies of it, and while we were up there, we saw Charlie Kirk in the flesh up there, and he was across the street from my brother, and somebody gave him A Great Controversy, and we watched, he put it in his jacket pocket. And that book also details the history of the Protestant Reformation and the battle that took place for hundreds of years between the Catholic Church and the Protestants. And one thing that's interesting is actually to watch Charlie Kirk's video where he actually gets into friendly little banter with Michael Knowles. You're familiar with Michael Knowles?
I think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he actually is a ardent Catholic, mm-hmm. and one of the members of the crowd asked them, what I think the question was about Catholicism. And they ended up kind of sort of answering the question, but then mostly just having a discussion back and forth, because Charlie Kirk, he was a Protestant. And Michael Knowles was trying to kind of argue the Catholic position, and was like, well, yeah, but you have to have somebody who's over everything, who decides everything, like a pope. And Charlie Kirk was like, well, but what if the Pope is corrupt? What if he's wrong? What do you do? Because you have somebody who's supposed to be inerrant, who's leading you astray, basically. And so he says that's when you get out and nail 95 Theses to the door. Talking about Martin Luther's famous Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was like, that's when you get out the 95 Theses and nail them to the church door.
If the pastors disagreed, they'd go to an elder or a bishop or someone, right? You'd go to
unless the
someone
bishop is corrupted, and
then you take it up higher. Yeah,
and then maybe the Pope is corrupted, and we write 95 points of complaints and hammer them to a door and get back to the Word. And I mean this like non-sarcastically, but like, why should I care at all what that guy from Argentina has to say?
Well, because you care what your pastor has to say.
Yes, but if my pastor starts saying crazy things, I find a new pastor. So if your Pope starts saying crazy things, maybe he's not the Pope. And like, maybe that's a bad representation. As an evangelical who loves Catholics, I love that you're doing it, but let me just edit what you say.
Here's the
but.
but.
No, it's a big one. You didn't catch it, Michael.
Yeah.
Is that your goal should be to bring people to Jesus, not Catholicism.
Oh, hold on.
No.
What's the difference? I don't think. Hold on.
I'm not saying that they're contradictory, but your goal should not to be to bring people to a specific sect of Christianity. It is to bring people to the cross.
You're saying to bring people to the fullness of the truth and the universal faith.
Yes, but not the maxims of every Catholic dogma. No, I mean, for example, am I a Christian if I don't believe in Mariology?
Well, we're talking about the fullness of the truth. We're talking about. But you still.
Am I a Christian if I don't believe in transubstantiation?
You are a little confused if you don't.
Okay.
But you
confused.
can have sincere. But you can have sincere.
No,
faith.
it's fine. I think that bringing people to Catholicism is fine. Of course, great, terrific. But that is hopefully a means to the ultimate end. You exist to bring to people to
Yes. No, of
Christ.
course.
But that is the goal. I'm just maybe being semantically,
But think about this question: what happens when you want to bring people to our Lord, and what happens when there are disagreements over important things? I mean,
we schism and say you guys got it wrong, or we do a reformation.
But so we're at Christmas right now. We're at Christmas time. We're talking about Saint Nicholas. Santa Claus.
I'm talking about Jesus.
And no, but I'm talking about Santa Claus. Before we talk about our Lord, there's this story.
These characters, like Jesus. Let's focus on the main thing. Look, to be very clear, like 9 out of 10 of Catholic dogmas, evangelicals hold. 9 out of 10, right? Yeah. And that is why I believe Catholics are Christian, even though you don't give me that same sort of charity.
I would.
But,
I would.
No, I'm giving you a hard time. And I mean that. Again, if you are a Catholic who loves Jesus, therefore, and I know that, I believe that there are personally some fundamental issues with, like I say, Mariology, transubstantiation, which we're not going to get into. But the biggest one is the papacy. I can't get over the idea of this Marxist who calls himself the head of your church being a representation of Christ our Lord. I mean that as someone who loves the Catholic impact on the world, that says it openly, and the fruit you will know it, and you have very Marxist fruit.
And so you had somebody in Charlie Kirk who was Protestant. He did not agree with the Catholic Church. And so it's sad to see someone like that have their voice silenced. Just from that side of it, taking the political side of it out. And just looking at it from a religious standpoint, it's sad to see his voice silenced as a result of that. And my heart goes out to his family and those who are affected by it.
Yeah, I as I kind of saw some of the news clips yesterday, I'm not sure that I've actually seen anything like that. Like on national television, like you said, with so many angles and video clips that people had taken personally and put them on the internet. And it's like, what a tragic thing, because, I mean, the families are no doubt seen these things as well. I would hope that they'll stay off the internet for a while, but I don't know how you could avoid that. And if I thought about that in my own life, if my own family member was put in that position or something like that, you just get like traumatized again and again and again. Violence, I don't believe is ever been God's way. To be honest. And, some people will argue, yeah, but he told, the Israelites to take these people out or whatever. And, you have to look at these things in context and understand why would God even make a judgment call like that.
But you hit on it right there, that word judgment, because God can read the hearts of those who are against him.
That's right.
And he knows if they're going to have a tendency to good or to evil or to what, right?
Yep.
And so when God commanded the Israelites to go and kill this group of people, he could read their heart.
Right.
Can you and I do that?
No.
And so can we ever condone violence where we decide in our own self, like, oh, I think this person deserves to die?
Right.
I don't believe that we can.
Same with me. I don't necessarily ascribe to that. That's something that belongs to God alone, I feel. Right. And there's so many variables with complex things that you read in the Bible, and I appreciate God's honest portrayal of what's happened in the Bible. If you think about it, like he was trying to hide something, then he wouldn't put those details in there, right?
Right.
And you can really dive into that, but it really, like you said, is so sad that his voice got shut off, and especially someone that was out there just wanting to orientate people back to God.
Well, we'd actually been given a contact to one of his people that was part of his team. And so our plan was to try and discuss with them and actually eventually have him on our podcast, which is
Heritage of Hope.
Heritage and Hope Ministries.
And Hope. That is an awesome channel. If you guys haven't checked them out, it's a lot of historical, amazing stuff. Did you learn Latin as well as your brother?
I've learned a little bit how to read it, but I would not say I'm an expert in Latin.
His brother's like taught himself how to read Latin and has read through all these documents. You guys should check that out. It's awesome.
But we were actually hoping to have him on to discuss the Sabbath further and kind of show him some of our research actually about the Sabbath, because he's writing a book about the Sabbath.
Yeah.
He's discussing the Sabbath. And so we were hopeful to have him on our podcast so that we could say, listen, there's actually more research than you even know that's not widely shared about how there were Christians that kept the Sabbath throughout the centuries.
Yeah. You see, actually, I know there's illustrations in Africa of people keeping the Sabbath. There's a lot of cultures around the world have had those, kind of writings on the walls or whatever. So it's not just isolated to us here in the end, or the Jews just right there. Right. This is something that I believe that God wrote it in stone. There's a reason why he wrote it in stone.
Right. And actually that's one of the things that we've been doing on our channel actually is discussing the Sabbath, but also discussing it with some of these Christian nationalists. We actually had an episode recently where we had Douglas Wilson on. Now, Douglas Wilson is a prominent Christian nationalist. He's been on with Tucker Carlson. He's, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has been, talking about him, that type of thing. Very well known. And we had him on our channel, and we discussed the Sabbath and Sunday laws and this whole Christian nationalist movement. He basically reaffirmed that, yes, they do want to seek legislation to impose a law that would, basically make people close their shops, stop working on Sunday. And we believe that that is that line in the sand distinction that's going to be at the end of time. Are we going to follow what the commandment says explicitly? 6 days shalt thou work, but the seventh is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. Or are we going to follow the traditions of men, which changed quite a while after Christ's death and crucifixion and resurrection?
Right.
And, we have history of Sabbatarians, Seventh-day Sabbatarians, keeping that Sabbath for the last 2,000 years. Almost every single century, we have a particular author that talks about how, even the peasants would keep the seventh day. We actually just got an old book that we're going to be discussing further about the Waldenses, who were known Seventh-day Sabbath keepers for a long time.
Yeah. I love the argument that it begins with the word remember.
Yes.
I just think that's, you really have to take a look at that and be like, so why would you put that? Like God's not like, remember not to cheat on your wife or remember to honor your mother and father, right? did God see through time that Satan would think to change the times and the laws and those things that are written in stone? And we see that change. We still engage with people all the time, like that believe Sunday was changed back in Jesus' resurrection, and we say, where's the biblical evidence of that? Not some example that the preacher went over the day and into the night, which if you're preaching on Sabbath and you go into the night, it's the next day.
Right.
Not those kind of examples. Something that says you need to now do this.
Well, I've had a lot of people tell me like, oh, well, you just have to show me in the New Testament where there's a command to keep the Sabbath. I just need a New Testament verse that talks about the Sabbath, and then it'll make sense to me. And I say, have you read Hebrews chapter 4? Yeah. Because Hebrews chapter 4 talks about the seventh day resting in that wise. And then if you drop down, it says, there therefore remaineth a rest.
That's right.
And so we know that Paul's pretty clear there. That whole chapter, if anybody's on the fence about Sabbath versus Sunday, read Hebrews chapter 4. It's in the New Testament. Just read it with an open mind, and you'll see that it's right there.
Yeah. All of these things that really kind of tie back to God's government, right? There's all these parallels that God's government shares. I mean, almost everything that God does, like it has some spiritual truth to a deeper truth, right? You can take a look at the sanctuary message that Moses built, the sanctuary that was a pattern after the one that's in heaven, right? And God gave him very specific things. Follow this, make this, don't deviate from what I'm showing you, right?
Yes.
Because those teach spiritual concepts.
Yep.
And just the way that we need to come to God and bring him, realize that we need a savior. I mean, that's the whole bringing the lamb into the courtyard. There's one door that you get in there and, you sacrifice that lamb, and then you come to the laver, which we know represents baptism. And then, the priest would then go into the holy, where it was like the incense and the showbread and the 7-branch candlestick. And we know that the incense is like the prayers mixed that go to heaven, and the showbread is really the word of God, right? I'm the bread of life. And the 7-branch candlestick is your witnessing, right? So it's the experience that God wants to have with the Christian.
Right.
Prayer, Bible study, and witnessing. You need to go out and tell people what you have learned about God. That's the only way, right? And when you look at history, this is why I love the Great Controversy, the book that you're talking about. If you guys haven't read this book, you need to pick this book up, because it goes through and shows you how Satan kind of perverted those things in life.
Yes.
Took those articles out. Almost the light of God's word was almost snuffed out when it was put in a language that no one else could read, right? And throughout history, God reinstated all those articles to the point where we come back to the end of time, and where is the experience of man supposed to be? It's supposed to be God writing his laws on our heart. Those things. And so what's in the most holy place? The 10 Commandments.
Right.
And God has now brought us back into a relationship with him, because if you look at the sanctuary system, it's that we got kicked out of a relationship in the Garden of Eden. We couldn't have that close connection, but God didn't leave us there. He said, I'm going to make a pathway for you to come back into a relationship with me. And this is something that I believe is strongly connected to the Sabbath. Right. And the reason why, do you listen to God and do what he says because God said it? Or do you come to God and say, well, everybody else is doing this over here, and I don't want to be the one weird guy that's not doing that, so I'm going to go along with what everybody's telling me over here? Or do we actually say, it doesn't matter if everybody's over there doing whatever. God said to do this, I'm going to do that.
One thing while you were saying that made me think is that Charlie Kirk, in his discussion with Michael Knowles, he actually referenced nailing 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Church, which is what Martin Luther did. And actually, one of the things that we do with our ministry is we actually buy old books from the Protestant Reformation that actually talk about this Reformation that took place, the steps that were taken to return to the Word of God. And actually, one of the books that we just just purchased, it still hasn't arrived yet, but it's being shipped over from over in Europe, is actually a book by Martin Luther it was printed after he died, but it contained his work, and in it actually talks about one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is later in his life, even Martin Luther started to see the truth about the seventh-day Sabbath.
Wow.
And so we're getting that actual book that's from the 1600s that discuss, or actually 1500s, that discusses this. And so it's exciting to see that Martin Luther, he was continuing to make strides to return to the truth throughout his life.
Yeah.
He wasn't a perfect man.
Right.
And it took him a while to get there, but he was making steps and trying to further his walk with God and take in as much truth as he could. Mm-hmm. And so I'm excited that when we get that book, we'll have to show it and discuss it. But
yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Please do.
But to have, Charlie Kirk referencing that's what we're talking about, that Protestant Reformation. And that's what Charlie Kirk believed in, is the Protestant Reformation and keeping the seventh-day Sabbath. And I think that's really cool. And I'm sad to see that is gone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think God has still come. Let us reason together.
Yes.
Like, let's talk about this. And we need to talk. Since when did we ever get into some kind of political situation that we can't even talk to each other?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's what saddens me the most, is it's like, we need to grapple with some of these things. We need to have discussion. Like I watched that video that you guys had with the Christian nationalists on there. We need discussion on that.
Right. Even if we disagree, we can still have a civil conversation, a respectful conversation.
That's right. And be okay with, hey, look, if you're not able to accept, or you're still holding to your side of the argument, I think it's still beneficial for all people to listen to the sides.
Well, and we were clearly disagreeing with Douglas Wilson when we had him on our channel, and yet we had a very respectful conversation. Yeah. But one of the things, he actually reposted our video on his blog that he has on his website, and he actually mentioned, now this is an argument for Christian nationalism that I've not encountered before. Wow. And so we were actually bringing something new that he hasn't really heard much of before to the table, which is, no, this is wrong, because you're trying to legislate something that we're going to disagree with because it's a command from God.
Right.
And I think that's important, that we stand for the truth in that regard.
The reason why I would go out in a very simple way with God is not forceful. Mm-hmm. When God said, don't eat this tree, don't eat the fruit of this tree, right? He did not stand there and say, if you eat the fruit, I'm going to chop your hand off. There's a consequence to it.
Yeah.
But he still said the information and then gave you the opportunity to choose,
Right.
And I think that, people have to have the right motive, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if people just going through the motions and pretending to sign up with your program, but actually intellectually in their brains, not even caring at all what you actually believe, or the reason why you would do that. I mean, the Sabbath is a very strong issue that it says it's a sign between me and my people. Mm-hmm. That's somebody that says, I'm going to do it because you asked, God.
Yes. Not
for any other reason outside of that. I'm just going to do it. God, you told me to do this, and I'm going to do it. That is a mental state that you are wanting to be, in humility, honoring what God said. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't think that legalizing that or forcing that is ever going to be a good outcome.
I think that where we would differ from the Christian nationalist side is that when the Bible talks about going out and discipling the nations, we would say that means to go out and teach, and to say, this is our argument from logic. It's up to you to obey it, but this is why we believe this, versus their side would say we need to impose this, if that makes sense. And I think that's the distinction that's there. And so while Charlie Kirk was probably more on the Christian nationalism side, wanting to legislate morality, I think he was trying his best to follow God. And I hope that one day in heaven I will get to meet him.